If you're a lawyer who wants to podcast, check out legalpodcasting.com.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Louis Casadia. I'm a criminal trial attorney in the South Jersey area. I'm going to be your host today on the New Jersey Criminal Podcast. Today we got attorney Jim Leonard here. He's going to be talking about one of his seminal cases that he handled, State versus Terry Olston. Jim, why don't you introduce yourself?
Lou, thanks for having me. My name is James Leonard. I'm a criminal practitioner. I've been practicing out of Atlantic City, Atlantic County, South Jersey for the better part of 24 years. Criminal law is my primary practice area. I do domestic violence. I appear in family court. I do DV trials, restraining orders. I do some entertainment law. I bounce around quite a bit. Superior, municipal, federal courts all over the state, but primarily based out of Atlantic County in South Jersey.
This podcast is not a source of legal advice. No two legal cases are the same. Contact an attorney if you require legal assistance.
You want to talk about your celebrity for a little bit or for a second?
Yeah, so in addition to, the criminal work, I've done some entertainment law over the last 10 to 15 years, known primarily for working with and representing Teresa Giudice from the Real Housewives of New Jersey, who is a client of mine to this day, a very dear friend, someone that I respect. Having worked with her for the last decade, I would say has brought me some of my most rewarding work, some of my most challenging work, but it has been a privilege to work with her and her family. I hold them very near and dear to my heart. But we're here today to talk about another case that I would say, prior to me getting involved with Miss Giudice and that world, I got involved with this case that was based off of a tragedy, actually, of 4 women that were found dead behind a stretch of motels in West Atlantic City here in Atlantic County back in November of 2006. And I got involved in April of 2007 representing an individual who was deemed a person of interest in that. Never formally charged, but labeled a person of interest, pictured on the front pages of the newspaper back when newspapers were actually a thing and people bought them and paid attention to them. Local news, Philadelphia news, national news programs like 48 Hours. It was a very big case, certainly at that time, back in 2007, the biggest thing that I was involved with.
And how did you become involved? How did you end up getting hired in the case?
So I actually remember driving down to Atlantic City the night that they found the bodies. I was actually coming down, spend time with family. We were actually playing cards. And I remember being on the expressway and just being distracted by lights and sirens and the illumination of lights that it looked like they were filming a movie, if I'm being honest with you. And I drove past it, not having any idea what I was driving past. I would learn the next day in the newspaper that they found 4 women. And obviously this was the crime scene. I was not the original attorney of Mr. Olson. He had another attorney who was based out of Salem County. I received a phone call, as I remember it, from a family member who asked me if I would travel to Salem County Jail to see him. And I had been in county jails, Atlantic County, Camden County, everywhere for a number of years as I was practicing by that point, 6 years or so. When I went to the Salem County Jail, I'll never forget this. And I'd been there before, and I've been there many times since. But when I went there and I told them who I was there to see, they took special precautions as if I was going to see, Hannibal Lecter. And they gave me a device that I can only describe as I remember it. It was shaped like a grenade. And they said that when I'm having a meeting with this individual, this device needed to remain on the table between he and I. So I said, well, what's that for? And they said, in the event that there is any sort of disturbance or physical altercation and the device gets knocked on its side, that will alert us to come. And I said, I don't think I'm not worried about that. And they said, you can't go in without it. There's no visit without it. I said, give me the device. We went in. I'm waiting for him. They bring him in, and knowing that he's allegedly involved with these murders, I don't know what to expect, but what I got was someone who immediately came off to me as someone that not only was not involved in this, but was not capable of such an act. And I can't really describe that, but just being in the presence of somebody that would have taken 4 lives, you would expect something about them when they walk in the room, and I did not feel that right away. We have a conversation. He tells me he's adamant that he was not involved in this. This was, the papers got it wrong. The police got it wrong. There was some different things going on, and I believed him. I really believed him when he told me that he had been questioned by the detectives intensely for anywhere from 6 to 8 hours without a lawyer, never asked for a lawyer because he had nothing to hide. If that wasn't enough, then he told me, well, I offered them my DNA. I said, take my DNA, you can have it. I have nothing to hide. And all of this led me to believe, including my gut instinct, there's no way this is the guy. So we end up making
Jim,
some small.
How did they?
Yes.
How was he? Why was he developed as a suspect in the first place?
So in West Atlantic City at that time, not today, but at that time, there was a stretch of seedy motels. And the women, there were 4 in total that were found behind those motels. So along like a dirt path and a little, I'm not going to call it, it's a stream of water, right? But it's more of like a drainage ditch. And this is between the Black Horse Pike and the Atlantic City Expressway. He, at that time, or for a period of time around that time, was working as a handyman in one of the hotels. And the story was that his room or his door actually backed up to the area in which these women were found. So the theory was, he had proximity to the location, he was there, and, they thought they had developed some other things that made him look like the guy.
Right.
But if my gut reaction wasn't what it was, him speaking without a lawyer wasn't what it was, when he told me that he offered to give them DNA, I felt really comfortable that the guy that I'm now going to represent, the guy that I'm sitting here with, is not the guy. So the conversation ends up making small talk. I tell him I'm going to get involved. I'm asking him about himself. We're just making generic small talk. And we're now getting ready to wrap up, and I'm grabbing my stuff, and my papers or my file, whatever, ends up knocking the device that separated us down. I had forgotten all about this thing, right? So it just is on its side. It doesn't make any noise. It's just no longer standing upright. It's on its side. So we're talking, and I hear this thunderous, it literally sounded like horses were coming towards us. Jesus. And I'm like, what is that sound? And he's like, I don't know. I don't know what it is. And I'm thinking, what is it? What is it? And
I'm sure you found out what it was pretty quick.
I found out exactly what it was, because out of the corner of my eye, here comes the officers in riot gear, shields, helmets, masks, and they are anticipating that Hannibal Lecter is attacking me and they're going to save my life. Meanwhile, the lawyer knocked the thing over. Right. I'm jumping up in front of them, waving my hands, telling them, stop, stop. I'm actually getting in front of him because I don't know what they're going to do. And I'm saying, I knocked the thing over, relax, stop. And they stopped. They were not happy with me at all. I got screamed at the entire walk back out of there and in the lobby to get my keys. But that's how I met my client, and that was our first meeting.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Now, why was he in the Salem County Jail?
So he was never actually charged here in Atlantic County, but what happened was he was from Salem. When they developed him as a person of interest in this Atlantic County investigation, they executed a search warrant on his home, and he was charged down there with an invasion of privacy charge, which I believe was a 4th-degree charge. There was some issues there, but they gave him an insanely high bail, a really high bail, because the thinking was they're eventually going to charge him with these murders. And I was very aggressive and very loud about, this isn't a bail, it's a ransom. I was maybe, hot dogging it a little bit, and I ended up getting him released. I don't remember what the time frame was, but it was within a couple of months, because we also did something else. In Atlantic County, even though he had volunteered his DNA during his initial interrogation, the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office filed a motion to compel his DNA, which he had voluntarily offered to give it to them. So we had a hearing. I remember that hearing was in June of 2007 or 2008. I don't remember.
Did you oppose the hearing?
No, we did not. And we actually, used the hearing to say, we volunteered it. They can have it. Shortly thereafter, we ended up getting him released, and he's been free ever since, God willing, and has never been charged, and lives a great, lives his life, but was never involved in this case. But my involvement in the case took some very interesting turns and had a lot of contact with individuals that some said they were responsible. Some said they knew who were responsible. I had a call within the last 90 days that I passed on to the prosecutor's office of somebody identifying someone they thought was a suspect. And, but there was one person in particular that I had a unique connection with in this case. So when we were appearing in court, there was a woman who was, and she's deceased, I'm not going to mention her name, but she was a very well-known prostitute in Atlantic City, right? She had done television shows and documentaries about Atlantic City, and she was, if you were in Atlantic City and you were a police officer or you were familiar with that area, you were familiar with this woman. She was well-known. And she had come to court when we went to court, and she gave an interview saying, I was with him, he was a customer of mine, and he told me he did horrible things, and he told me that, he was at a foot fetish. Because the interesting part about the foot fetish was all 4 of these women were found without shoes. All 4 of these women were found without shoes, and they were all facing in the eastern direction. So they were facing towards Atlantic City, and, some FBI profiler at the time came up with some theory about why they were all facing east, which I don't really think there was much to that, but none of them had shoes.
What was the theory from the FBI as to why they were pointing east?
So the theory, which sounds ridiculous at this time, is that the killer may have been of Middle Eastern descent, and he was facing all of the women towards Mecca. I thought that was the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, and I only heard it from one person, and he was a, retired profiler. With all due respect, I thought it sounded insane to me.
There's a little bit of grasping at straws there, trying to make sense of something that probably just means nothing.
Correct. But, I don't think there was any religious connotation to what happened here, but this woman, she comes to court and she gives an interview outside the hallway.
Can I ask you real quick? Was Terry Olston, was he Muslim in religious practice?
Absolutely not. No.
So that theory didn't even help the state, right?
That's the point. Correct.
Yeah. So you were saying about the witness.
So she gives an interview, and they ask me what I think of her interview, and I said some things that were not nice about her, attacking her credibility, so on and so forth. We go home. maybe 2 months later, my office is in Atlantic City. My office is 3 or 4 blocks away from the area where most of these women were last seen, right? On Pacific Avenue. I'm on Atlantic Avenue, but it's about 4 blocks away. So I'm stopped at a red light, and I look over, and I see the woman that I just described coming towards my car. So I'm like,
Okay.
I don't want to talk to this person. I don't want to be seen with this person. And she starts knocking on, I'm pretending I don't see her. She starts knocking on my window.
Was this the same woman that gave the statement? The prostitute
Correct.
that gave the statement?
Correct.
Gotcha. All right, so she
Correct.
comes
So I
up
pretend I don't see her.
She
but
comes
she's
up to your
knocking on my
car.
window.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want to be seen with her, but she's knocking on the window.
Yeah.
Roll down the window. I got to talk to you, she says. I said, well, do me a favor. Come to my office. I tell her where my office is. I'm going there now. You can come there, but I'm gone. I'm not going to sit there and talk to her, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
about 20 minutes later, the secretary...
For those watching, just to understand, you know, when you're an attorney and you're especially in a high profile case like that, you do not want to talk to witnesses by yourself because it could just create all sorts of problems for you.
You also don't want to be seen in broad daylight talking with a very well-known prostitute.
That's
right?
another layer too. Yeah, I mean, definitely don't want that. But continue, Jim.
I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. Right?
I can only imagine. Like,
so the secretary tells me this person is here.
Right.
Comes back, and she says, "No, this is where it gets actually pretty interesting." So she comes back, and she says, "I made a mistake." I said, okay, it wasn't your guy. I said, tell me why. Now, what she doesn't know is when I got involved in the case, I gathered as much material as I could find. Now, I'm involved in April of 07. They find the bodies in November of 06.
Right.
So, and this meeting that I'm having with her is sometime between June and October, I think, of 07.
So when you say you gathered materials, what materials did you gather?
So there were a ton of newspaper articles written about the incident.
Right.
She is interviewed in one of them, and her name is mentioned. Like I said, she was extremely well known at that time. She was just somebody that was part of the fabric of Atlantic City, right? For whatever she did, but people knew who she was. So she gives an interview the day after the bodies are found to the New York Post, which I had the interview.
Right.
In it, she talks about being with a man who was a customer who said he had done horrible things.
Right.
Had a foot fetish, so on and so forth. All the same things that she said about my client in her interview. But she gives a description, and the description is contained in the article. She said he had a really big beer belly. My client doesn't have a beer belly.
Right.
He had a beard. My client, I don't believe, had a beard at that time. I don't remember. Was wearing sunglasses, and she said was wearing a hat, a black hat with a gold insignia. So she describes somebody, and she's describing that person's not my client. So when she tells me that she made a mistake in my office, I said, well, tell me why. How'd you make a mistake? She said, because your client is in jail, and I recently spoke to the guy that I was talking about, so I now know it wasn't your client. Okay, so you spoke to him? Yeah. So, do you got his name? No. Blah, blah, blah. He just he calls me when he comes to town.
Did she have a nickname for him?
So, well, this gets very interesting. I'm telling you, this gets very interesting. Yeah. So I said, all right, great. I said, well, one day, maybe you can come in here, and in the same way that you put it all out there, maybe you can put it all out there that you got the wrong guy, right? Fast forward, we get my guy released, and we do 48 hours. We do an episode of 48 hours. I think it was called Beyond the Boardwalk, something like that. I'm featured on it. There's a bunch of people on it. They put her on it.
Okay.
She, if I'm not mistaken, at this point, She might still be telling the story about my guy. I forget the timeline, but that's not really important.
So at that
Eventually,
point, she was mistaken about being mistaken.
or shortly thereafter. But
Gotcha.
what ends up happening is, in my office, in the very office that I'm sitting in now, I hold a press conference.
Right.
I invite her, I invite my client, and I invite the husband of one of the deceased 4 women. And all the media people come. And
Right.
she apologizes to my client.
Okay.
And she says, it's not him, so on and so forth. And the husband of one of the women says, I don't believe it's him, or something along those lines, but I want to put the attention back on finding whoever did this. Which, by the way, way too much attention was given to my client and whether he was or wasn't. And in my opinion, never enough attention given to these 4 women and their families. 4 women, several of them, I believe, were mothers. They were sisters. They were daughters. Some of them were wives. These were real people. And they had fallen on some hard times and some challenges.
I'll just ask you real quick about those women.
Yeah.
Were they all, was it alleged that they were all also prostitutes, or
Correct.
were they?
Yeah.
Okay.
They were all prostitutes. That was what was reported at the time. And in large part, it was like they were forgotten in all of this, right? And so anyway, fast forward now, I remember this because this is a very critical day. I tell my office on this particular day, I'm leaving. I'm doing something that day, and I don't want to be interrupted unless it's an absolute 911 emergency. I need a day. Leave me be. Don't call me with the normal stuff. Give me one day. Sure enough, that day by noon, the office is calling with a 911 emergency. And the 911 emergency is that woman, the woman that we're talking about, was demanding to speak to me. She was in the office and wouldn't leave until she spoke to me.
Oh my God.
I get on the phone and she said, I just want you to know the guy that I've been talking about is coming to Atlantic City tonight. I'm going to meet with him. And this is the kicker. I've already reached out to America's Most Wanted. They're coming down to get him on video.
Right.
So I said, wait, what? She said, absolutely. I had a relationship with one of the producers when they were investigating this story. I just wanted you to know. I said, well, now I guess I'm going to come down to Atlantic City. So I reach out to the America's Most Wanted producers. I get the numbers. They're on their way from D.C., the whole bit.
Right.
So now remember the description I gave you. The beer belly, the beard,
Right.
the hat, black hat, gold insignia, sunglasses. So she calls me and says, I'm going to be at this particular location. So I had a private investigator who worked with me at the time, who was a former police officer. He said, I'm going to call a police officer and have them go and at least do surveillance. The police officer does one better. He sees the 2 of them, and the gentleman that she's with is drinking an open container in public.
Right.
So he gives him a citation.
Right.
But in doing that, he gets his name.
Right.
He gets his identifiers. Right? My investigator is over there taking pictures from afar.
Right.
America's Most Wanted is still on the way down. So when the guy comes back to my office, he shows me the pictures. Beer belly, check. Beard, check. Sunglasses, check. Now, mind you, this is a year after she gives this exact description to the New York Post. Here's the kicker for me. He's wearing a New Orleans Saint baseball hat.
Right.
Black hat with a gold insignia.
There you
Not
go.
only is it the same guy, he's wearing, in essence, the exact same outfit a year later. So America's Most Wanted comes down. They actually use my office as a staging. So they get all this stuff set up. They bring a very attractive female correspondent who is going to go undercover This is what they're going to do. So I'm not going to mention the name of the establishment because they probably wouldn't want the notoriety.
Can I ask though, just like at this point, is the prosecutor's office aware of what's happening, or are they involved at all?
We're going to come back to that point in a second.
I got you. All right.
They were not real thrilled with what I'm getting ready to tell you. Okay. They got to remember, this is when I first got involved with the case. Jeff Blitz was the prosecutor. After Mr. Blitz, it was Prosecutor Housel, God rest his soul. Right. So I was involved at Blitz into the transition to Housel. I don't remember who the prosecutor was at this time. It may have been Housel, but it may have been Blitz. I don't remember when when that happened. But so the America's Most Wanted is going to go to where he is, and they're going to send this very attractive correspondent who's wearing a microphone and a camera to engage him.
Right.
So he is sitting on a porch of we'll call it a local hotel that has like a porch, like a rooming house type thing.
Okay.
She drives up, he's there, and she's trying to do something with her car. She's pretending that her car won't start. So
Gotcha.
this guy, our guy, comes off of the porch and offers to help. Gets himself on camera, gets close to her. She pops the hood. The car, is nothing wrong with the car anyway. He tells her what to do. She starts the car up. Magically, it works. She says, "I'm so grateful. Thank you. What can I call you? What's your name?" So he refers to himself as he says to her, "You can call me River, darling." Those were his exact words. "You can call me River, darling." So he's calling himself River. Okay. She leaves. They come back. They got him on video. Blah, blah, blah. Night's over. Right? Night's over. So now they got the guy on video. They got his name from the open container citation. I call the prosecutor's office. I'm expecting like a pat on the back, like good work.
Nah,
they're not happy.
Nah, you're not getting
they're not
that.
happy.
No way.
They don't like any of this. They don't like any of this. Right?
Right.
So whatever. A month goes by. A full month. Secretary calls. The lady's back in the office. She has to see you. It's an emergency. Bring her back. And she comes in and she's got something in her hand. She has a card in her hand, like a birthday card in an envelope. Okay. And I said, "What's this?" She said, "He wrote me a letter. He wrote me a letter." I said, "The guy wrote you a letter?" "Yeah." "Well, he gave me a card." So I opened the card up. Now, her name and address are on the front. It's postmarked from Florida, right? So I know she didn't do this because she never leaves Pacific Avenue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Postmarked from Florida, her name and address. I open it up. Chilling when I open it up. It's on the outside of the card are 4 angels. Now remember, we're talking about 4 deceased women. So there are 4 angels.
Right.
Like there, and it might have been one angel that was like ascending to heaven, but there was 4 silhouettes of the angels. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
Open the card up. I forget what the card said, by Hallmark or whoever makes the card, but handwritten, it says, "To the woman, from the man, thanks for the CD."
Oh.
So I say to her, "What's he talking about?" She said, "Oh, he wanted the DVD of the 48 hours. He knew I had it. He left with the DVD." So I'm like, "Why would he want that?" She's like, "He was the guy, I'm telling you." So I go back to the envelope and I look at the return address, his return address.
Right.
Some address in Florida, which by the way was not real because we looked it up, wasn't real. But as his name, at the top, he puts the Riverman. Okay? Now, refers to himself as River with the America's Most Wanted correspondent. So while she's standing over my desk, I Googled the Riverman. The Riverman is a book and a documentary about the Green River Killer who hunted prostitutes in Seattle, Washington, or outside of Seattle, Washington, and dumped their bodies in the Green River. There's a body of water there. All 4 of these women were prostitutes, and they were partially submerged in this, stream, if you will. So I'm like, wait a second. This guy's nickname,
Did they catch the Riverman in Seattle?
They caught the Green River Killer. They caught the Green River Killer. The Riverman is writing this woman a letter.
Right.
So now I'm like, if you're going to come up with a nickname, you're going to name yourself after a serial killer that kills prostitutes. You're going to spend time with a prostitute. You're going to talk to her about a foot fetish. All the boxes are being checked. And by the way, all of this is good for my client because if he's the guy that did it, my guy didn't do it, right? So I'm like, plus, 4 women are dead, right?
Can we back up real quick? I just want to go back.
Yeah.
The 4 for the 60 minutes
48 hours.
What 48 hours, sorry. Other than, pretending their car was broke and talking to the guy and getting his nickname, did he say anything to them, or did they did anything come of that?
Now that was America's Most Wanted. Now here's the irony of that. They filmed that segment.
Right.
And America's Most Wanted ceased to exist. Months later, it never made the air.
Oh, okay.
What I described to you never made the air. It's in some archive somewhere.
I gotcha. So was something said in that segment that would be evidentiary if they ever charged him with something?
Other than him referring to himself as
the Riverman.
River.
Right.
Right?
I gotcha.
So now I feel like, I'm not a detective, I'm a lawyer, but I'm like, this is pretty good. Call the prosecutor's office again. Somebody comes out to my office. I'll never forget. I've got in a bag the envelope, the card, the original. Figured maybe he licked the envelope. There's DNA. You've already got his name. See, I know you got DNA from the crime scene because you took my client's DNA. So why not? They were not happy. They were pissed. And
what did they want you to do?
They wanted me to shut up. And there was a divide in that office at that time of people that I think thought my guy was the guy.
Right.
And then there was others that didn't think he was the guy. I can tell you that a very, very, very well-respected FBI agent who's now retired, who I have a professional relationship with, told me unequivocally, my guy was not the guy, and he never subscribed to that theory, even in the beginning, but there were some that did. And to this day,
I can tell you from personal experience, and for the audience, I was a prosecutor for 7 years before I started my practice. Once the police have a theory on the case and they start really going down that rabbit hole, it is very difficult for them to change course. So not surprised that you were in that position.
And listen, we're going on. This is almost 20 years ago of them finding the bodies and so on. We're approaching in October. It'll be 19 years, right? So I will say this to the credit of the subsequent administrations because started off with Prosecutor Blitz, Prosecutor Housel, God rest his soul. Then it went to Prosecutor McLean.
Right.
Then it was Prosecutor Tyner, now Prosecutor Reynolds. I have spoken with detectives in every administration dating back to Blitz about this case. It's been assigned, reassigned. I can tell you that I had contact within the last 90 days. So this is 19 years later.
Yeah.
With an investigator working it now. Recently about a call that I got, pass it on, and I can tell you that they are very eager to solve it, right? So I think
I did see, and even when I was at the office, there was definitely an effort to work on the case, even though it was so old. And I won't get into the specifics of what they were doing because I don't know if that's public, but that definitely, like, they were spending time on it.
sure.
So did they take the card from you then, Jim?
They did. They actually
Okay.
took it. I gave them anything that I've ever developed as a lead, including, by the way, recently a call that I passed that on. I'm always going to pass on what somebody gives me. I had somebody, just to back it up, I had someone who's now deceased as well call me from the jail, tell me that they did it. I went in to see him with an investigator. We recorded it. He admitted it. Turns out they didn't believe that it was him. This is somebody completely different.
Any particular reason? Did he, like, that guy that gave that confession, was there a reason you could tell? I mean, was he just looking for attention?
I don't know if he was looking for attention or what. I mean, this was a big thing. This was in all the newspapers.
Right.
I mean, look, I think there's better ways to get attention than admitting to 4 murders that you probably didn't commit, right? Like,
when was that he gave that statement?
Within a year or so of the.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah, it was contemporaneous to the time. I do know that they investigated him, and they found out that whether he'd been in jail at one point or had relocated, that he wasn't the guy.
Right.
So they dismissed him, had a guy from a state prison in another state reach out. I did it. I want to clean my conscience. I give the information to the prosecutor's office. I actually think they might have flown out to this state to interview him.
Right.
Wasn't him.
Man.
So apparently, Lou, there's something that you're learning here today. Apparently, there are people out there that like to admit to being serial killers when they're not serial killers. So I think those people need to find some hobbies.
Let me back up. Let me back up a little bit. I just have a couple questions about the women. So they find these 4 bodies. They're all facing east. Did they determine that they were all killed, like, in the same night? Were they killed, like, at different points in time?
So that's a good question. So I don't know where the women were killed. They never actually, I don't believe they know where the women were killed.
Right.
I don't believe, and I think that's one of the challenges that has always existed with this case is I don't believe they're aware of a crime scene. They know where the bodies were dumped. Each of the women were in different stages of decomposition.
Yeah.
Right. So it's November. They're in the partially submerged in water.
Yeah.
So they weren't all dumped at the same time or in this. They were all dumped within, like, let's say 100 yards of one another, give or take. But they weren't on top of each other.
They were not right next to each other.
Correct.
They were found.
They were all within, let's say, 50 to 100 yards of one another, all without shoes, all facing the same direction, and in various stages of decomposition.
And how were they found?
So I wouldn't advise this to anybody listening, but apparently if you're going down the Black Horse Pike and the expressway are parallel to one another, there was, and there still is, like, a dirt trail that you can walk. So apparently people that live in that West Atlantic City area, not where the motels are, but across the street, there's like condos and stuff, would routinely go back there and walk like it was like a track.
Right.
And 2 women, women that are not part of that underworld, 2 women that were actually out exercising, came across the first body.
Right.
Freak out, call 911. I think they saw the second body.
Yeah.
Police come, they get rid of the women, and if I'm not mistaken, the police find bodies 3 and 4 because again, there's some distance.
What was the cause of death?
I believe it was something along the lines of them being asphyxiated or strangled, something like that.
Okay, I gotcha. So are you aware? Did they ever get either from the envelope or separately from, the Riverman and the DNA sample to test against what they may have had?
So this is my theory, and this is complete speculation. I think that the DNA whatever DNA they gathered way back when, I believe was compromised because of the elements of the fact that these women are outdoors for a period of time, are submerged in water. So while they were gathering DNA, I don't know what the quality of the sample would have been to compare it. So I don't know what they did or didn't do with the envelope. I do know with my guy, he gave his DNA in 2007 or 2008. Obviously, he's free, so it tells you what it tells you either he wasn't the guy.
There was no DNA match there.
Right. So, otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation. Right. So, and then, when there was the murders of women who also, I believe, were involved with prostitution in New York on Long Island, the Giglio Beach, there was some thinking that it was the same person.
Right.
I was led to believe that that person's DNA did not match with this, which leads me to believe then that maybe they do have DNA, but those are not related. They did explore that one.
Right. So, at what point did you know that they weren't going to charge your client? Did they tell you, hey, we're moving on from your client? Or is it just kind of well, it's been a year, I guess they're not charging them?
So early on, it was palpable that they were going to charge him.
Right.
And I remember having conversations with Prosecutor Housel about the case. And it appeared that, at least in his opinion, charges were potentially going to happen. As when my guy got released from jail after giving the DNA shortly thereafter, that's when I knew he's not getting charged. I think that we had done enough of a job of creating reasonable doubt, even though we were never formally, with one exception of doing the DNA. I was in court with him on the invasion of privacy down in Salem. I think I did a temporary restraining order for him with some women down in Salem as well. But I think we created enough reasonable doubt utilizing the media and all the interviews and stuff that boring. And look, when you take the DNA, that's supposed to be the DNA matches, you got a problem, right?
Yeah.
You take the DNA and the DNA doesn't hit. I think that's when they started to maybe back off.
Yeah. What was the Salem case about? The invasion of privacy?
It was an invasion of privacy. There was a camera in a location where there shouldn't have been a camera, and it captured some images, something. It was all in the media. It's all public record, but that was that. But I will tell you this. My client he presented himself to me on day one as someone that was innocent and somebody that was, in my opinion, not capable of committing these acts.
Right.
And I stand by that today, and that I feel good based on my initial read and my initial gut reaction. Meeting him in the Salem County Jail was, this is not the guy. This is not the guy.
Yeah. And do you still talk to him at all to this day?
He and I are friends on Facebook. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well,
gotcha.
Every now and again I'll get a comment or a message from him, and haven't seen him in probably a decade or so.
Right.
He would come down to the office because A&E would do it. A&E did a documentary. He participated in a handful of these events, but I think he's moved on with his life and probably doesn't want to revisit it. And
I don't know that
there. Right. And I also don't think there is a, massive amount of interest. Case is almost 20 years old at this point.
Yeah.
But I think that anybody that's talking about that case should focus on the women, their families, their children. These are real people. And the irony is, about a month or so before the bodies were discovered, I actually just told this story not too long ago to a woman that I was visiting in the Camden County Jail. I was in the Atlantic County Jail. This is back in 2006.
Right.
I'm waiting for my clients to come down, and they weren't bringing the men down because they had women there. There were some female inmates. And one of them was making small talk with me. I was sitting right across from her.
Right.
She was friendly. She was making jokes, and I remembered her face, right? I remembered her face. When they found the bodies and they put these women on the newspaper, they put their faces. She was one of the four.
He was one of them.
And it was chilling to me because she was so, light and personable. She obviously had whatever challenges she had in life, but to then say, wait, that was one of the, that's one of the four. I got to meet the husband of one of them. He was in the office. Very, very sad. The one I know from the 48 hours had a young child who's probably now almost 30 years old, right?
Right.
And has spent the last 20 years, 19 years without their mother. That's a hard thing. That's a hard thing.
When you say they should pay more attention to the victims, are you suggesting there's like some sort of connection between the four of them as to who did this?
No. Well, other
than the fact that they may have been prostitutes at the time.
I think that had this been four school teachers, God forbid, there would have been, we can't forget them. I think that over the years, because of the challenges that these women had with respect to what they did or what they were doing at the time, I want to say that they've been marginalized. I don't necessarily mean by law enforcement, because I stand by what I said. They are actively trying to solve this, right? I know that because
I agree. I saw that firsthand from when I was there.
Media accounts focused more on the mystery of the whodunit and less about who these women were. And I feel that, unfortunately, there's a cautionary tale here, right? These women were involved with a lifestyle that's not a good lifestyle. Drugs are involved, I guess, to some extent, but they're put in these very vulnerable situations. And I just feel that people should be aware of this is what happened. And I think it's a cautionary tale, but it's heartbreaking. I have in my office in another room on the wall newspaper articles from that time. And when I go look at them, one of the articles very prominently has all four women's faces. So I see their faces several times a week. They're always on my mind. They're always on my mind, as are their families. I pray for them.
And during the investigation, let me ask you this first. Did you ever get any discovery regarding, I guess they never charged your client, so you probably got nothing, right?
I did. I actually did. Because there were search warrants executed, I got search warrant returns, and I got affidavits for probable cause related to the search warrant.
You got the affidavits.
So I did get that.
Was there any, I imagine they did some investigation into just the victim's background, like as far as like who saw him last, like where they were, did that amount to anything that pointed in any direction?
I think that circumstantially, the proximity of the room that he was occupying to where the bodies were found, I believe that's what they were doing. That's my belief. That's my belief.
So like looking into each of these women, like, oh, they were last seen in this over here. They were seen. Do you think that sort of drew them to your client?
No, I think where they found the women drew them to my client.
Okay.
Because of where they were found. But I do know with respect to all four of them they were, I guess, known to frequent that area that I described where the original woman was that came up to my car. Right. But I do know that one of them was at the Taj Mahal, which is now the Hard Rock. And I know that they know that because of they tracked the phone, right? They tracked the phone. So, and they know who that person was with at the casino. But I think the surveillance and whatnot showed that they left the casino and went with someone else, not that person, and they don't know who that someone was.
Do you think in today's day and age, you've been doing this for over 20 years. I've been doing it for, about 8 or 9, it seems to me, and tell me if you agree, it seems to me that it would be a lot more difficult in today's world to get away with something like this, where number one, there's cameras everywhere. I mean, every case, you know it as well as I do. You take a case on in Atlantic City, and it's a high-profile case, a homicide or something. There's poll cameras. There's cameras from businesses that are linked up to ACPD where they pull them right out.
You have to assume that, well, we just talked about the Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
That particular woman, presumably using a cell phone or somehow, some way,
yeah,
had, connected with this individual, got in a car, and they went somewhere. All of that should have been on video. Today would be. But the rest of them presumably are picked up. There's cameras at every intersection. Atlantic City's got cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't believe that crime could happen that way for that period. I agree. I think
agree.
technology would preclude that.
It seems you would really have to plan out every infinitesimal detail to get away, because just these 4 women, I mean, everyone has a smartphone now. Even people who back in 2006 maybe couldn't afford one, and now everyone has a smartphone. And
the perfect example is, look at the case up in New York with the guy that killed the healthcare CEO.
Yeah,
everything's on video, and then they track him back to the rooming house.
Right.
And he lowers his mask for 1 second to smile at a clerk. And there's the picture that's broadcast all over.
There you go. I mean,
and then they get him in a McDonald's in another state based on that. I mean, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, I could tell you the first thing, if this happened today, all those women, number one, everyone has cell phones. So did anyone report them missing?
That's a question that I don't believe I know the answer to.
Yeah. I mean, I just from my doing, what I did for 7 years in Burlington and Atlantic County, being a prosecutor, I mean, some of the first things they would do now, okay, does the victim have a cell phone? What's the phone number? They're going to go get a communications data warrant over from the phone company. They're going to get a log of all the different phone calls that were made. But most importantly, they're going to get a history of the cell towers that they pinged off of. So it's going to give them an approximate location. Okay, and then they're going to work their way backwards from there. Which, depending on what some of the phone companies save text messages. They would theoretically be able to get text messages depending on what phone company it is. So yeah, like going back to what we were saying before, it just seems like it would be really hard for somebody to just kill these 4 women without leaving behind some sort of footprint, either digitally or on video. Which it's a shame, but yeah, I mean, hopefully. What do you think their angle is now? Like that they're working on, on the case. Like where do you think they are? Like when they came to speak to you, that I don't not to divulge anything that they may have told you not to mention, but I mean, did they ask you any questions that kind of give you an idea of like what direction they're going in?
Honestly, no. It's an active investigation. They're looking into it, but no, there was no, it would be pure speculation, but I can tell you that if I've been involved with that investigation and again, I want to be crystal clear, I basically told you everything I've been involved with. I'm not actively involved. Nobody shares anything with me. I share with them, but nobody shares with me as they should. Nobody should be sharing anything with me, but I can tell you that in the beginning, in the early years, the time frame that I'm talking to you about, 07, 08, 09, it seemed like nobody wanted to hear from me because I think they wanted my guy.
Right.
That switched sometime not too long after that, and I would say that my encounters with them over the last decade or so have been more, what do you got? We'll look at it. We'll take it in. And so there's definitely been a shift, but everybody that I've encountered, even the ones that I think were adverse to, my client or me at that point,
right?
In my opinion, they all wanted to solve this case. They had their theories. They might have thought this defense attorney is doing whatever he can do to create doubt around his client, which I was.
Yeah,
But
sure.
I was also giving them leads, doing my job, but I was also giving them what I thought were investigative leads. I mean, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but when somebody nicknames themselves after a serial killer that kills prostitutes and dumps them in water, I don't know. I'd take a look at that guy.
Yeah. Well, you would hope that. I mean, did you, from your own knowledge, like, did they go and talk to that guy, or did they look into that guy?
They had all the information. What they did with it, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that individual's alive or not. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows? I mean, certainly, I know that, they've been making a lot more advances in just from personal experience. They've been making a lot of advances in DNA. So you wonder at some point, does that advancements bridge a gap that they might have in identifying a profile for the killer?
But you also have to say to yourself, we're going on 19 years.
Yeah.
Whoever this person is might be deceased.
Yeah, for sure.
Like witnesses might be we're talking about, think about all the prosecutors that I mentioned. Blitz is retired.
Yeah.
Prosecutor Housel, God rest his soul, he passed away. Prosecutor McLean is still, active.
Yeah.
Prosecutor Tyner, they're no longer with the office, right? But the point being is there were investigators that have retired, some have passed. So the passage of time never helps with these cases. It just doesn't.
For sure. You got to imagine there's going to be a point where they're just going to close it. And it may not be for a while from now, but at some point they're going to say, you know what, this person is more than likely deceased. We've exhausted all investigative leads. Like there's really bearing like some sort of technological advancement that neither one of us can foresee. Like, at some point they're probably going to say like, there's just nothing more we can do. But it didn't seem like they'd reached that point yet, at least when I was,
right.
When I was there.
And listen, my goal and my responsibility to all of this was to prove, in my opinion, that they were wrong about my client.
Right.
And I think I did that. He's been free for almost 2 decades, and he remains free, living his life. So to that point, I did my job, and I know that they're doing theirs. And I will say this is one that I can absolutely say I am rooting for them. I am rooting for them.
Yeah, I mean,
to find the killer.
Right.
But I am absolutely certain that if they do, and God willing they do, that they're going to find out that it wasn't my guy. But there shouldn't be somebody walking among us that's capable of taking the lives of 4 women and they just get away with that. That can't happen. So I'm rooting for the state to eventually find the person or persons responsible for those murders.
Is that trail where the women were the bodies were dumped? Like, was that trail, like, I don't know if hidden's the right word, but was it one of those things where if you didn't live in Atlantic City or live in the area that you wouldn't really know about it?
I can tell you this. I was born in Atlantic City. I spent a lot of time working in the casinos, spent a lot of time driving the Black Horse Pike, the Atlantic City Expressway. I never knew what was between the two.
Yeah.
So
right.
I would assume that if you ever frequented those motels, you would know that it existed. Right. I would assume that if you maybe did work on, like, the highways, or you knew what was back there. But I would think that if you were a guy from New York, you would not know about that. So that's a very good question. The motel that we're talking about was called the Golden Key Motel. It's no longer there. It was razed. It's just, the footprint of it is still there. And so are some of the other places back there. But that's what it is.
Right. Right. Yeah, it makes you wonder, whoever did this, at a minimum, like, visited that area recreationally enough to know that this trail was there, which...
Correct.
Did that person stumble upon the trail? Did he find out about it and say, you know what, this would be a great spot to dump some body? or did he just know about it already? Yeah, and that other individual, Riverman, like you said he was from Florida. Did he move? Did you know? Like, did he grow up in Florida or did he move down there?
So the document that he mailed to the woman was postmarked from Florida with a phony address.
Right, that's right. You said it was phony. So was he actually
from what I gather, because I did some research on him, I got the impression that he was a little bit of a drifter.
I got
so
you.
I don't know exactly where he was from. I can tell you that, and I'm not going to put his name out there, but when you go down the rabbit hole of what was talked about, and you look his name up,
was his name? Is his name public? Like, did they report on him?
Nobody ever reported on him, but it's out there somewhere. You can find anybody that really wants to go digging. It's you can find who this person is or was, whatever. But a family member actually posted on a message board to this individual, "Hey, if you're still alive, this is my address, my number. Reach out to me." So I think even this individual's own family was looking for him.
Yeah. I mean, how old was he at the time?
If I'm not mistaken, he was probably in his 50s or 60s. He wasn't a super young man. So presumably now would be in his 70s or later, but I don't know that he was necessarily living. Like, I don't know that he was going to the gym a lot and making doctor's appointments.
I mean, who knows if he is still alive? Who knows what kind of health issues he has at this point? But yeah, I mean, I hope they solve it one day. I was rooting for him when I was there. Obviously, I wasn't involved in the investigation. I just knew they were doing it, and. You always sat there and hoped that maybe they'd make a break in the case, but at this point, who knows?
Some very good investigators, a good office of people that are compassionate and care. I will tell you that those that are currently assembled in the major crimes and whatnot, this would be the team that would bring it home, I would think. So
it's a shame. It's a shame when you got a good team of people and they're going in there opening a file that's 20 years old. There's only so much that like you read a report and you're thinking to yourself, well, what's the answer to question X? Well, that was never asked. Now that witness is deceased, right? So it stinks to the extent that you got really good guys working the case now. And maybe if there had been a different attitude back then, they could have asked those questions that are now, unfortunately, perhaps unasked forever. But Jim, I think we hit
Lou.
the
I
hour
appreciate
mark.
you. I wish you the best as you host this for as long as you do. You're stepping into some big shoes.
Yeah,
right? Meg
I'm
Horner,
sure.
who started it, is someone that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. Little known fact, I know that this came up somewhere in something that she and I did together. Many, many years ago, when I was an intern in the Philadelphia DA's office in the late 90s, I was Meg Horner's intern. Not a lot of people know that.
No shit.
And then all these years later, we reconnected when she was a prosecutor in Cumberland and Cape May, and then as a very well-respected defense attorney. But can't find them better than Meg, I can tell you that. She's the best.
I'll tell you a similar story. I was Marissa McGarvey and Emily Bell's intern back in 2014. But
two good ones there. Two good ones for sure.
Yeah, so Emily's over. She's in the Cumberland Public Defender's office now. She's doing doing drug court, and then I'm sure Marissa's at the AG's office.
She's with the AG's office. So yes, so good lineage there. You learn from good ones, and I learned from a good one. The other person that I interned for became the actual district attorney in one of the counties outside of Philadelphia. So listen, those internships are very important. You forge good relationships, and it is what it is.
All right, Jim. Well, it was good talking to you. Thanks for coming
Likewise.
on. I'll see you in court the next time I see you.
See you soon. All right, take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
The best way to follow, subscribe, rate, or message the show is to visit njcriminalpodcast.com.
For more information or to contact Louis Casadia, you can go to lacelaw.com. That's LACELAW.com. To launch a podcast or to upgrade a podcast to video, go to nichepodcastpodcast.com.